Good evening to everybody, and thank you for spending time for hearing this. And thank you, Sumit, thank you, Priyanka. But for your help, I don't think because I am not tech savvy. I belong to the era where we use the paper. And I must confess that I would not have been able to do it except for my daughter, Arushi's help, because she knows how to change and swipe through these technical devices. So thank you very much. But I think time has come that even at this age we got to learn. We don't know how long this lockdown is going to continue, and recently it has been more of a video conferencing by the lawyers in urgent cases. So I think we got to cope up with. Having said so, good evening again to everyone who has joined. I am sure that all of you must be taking quite care of yourself, though these are quite testing times. But nevertheless, we have to keep our spirit alive. I believe that this shall also pass. One positive side of Corona downfall, I believe, has been that it has given us opportunity to interact at least on legal nuances within our fraternity through this technological means. And I'm sure this sort of a interaction possibly could not have been there if it was a normal hustle bustle court days where we after court hours just rush to the office and do your work, prepare for cases next day. Be that as it may, when I was approached to contribute to this pattern of teaching, I was not too sure what subject do I pick up. Then I realized that what these guidance would be more beneficial to the lawyers ranging from 0 to 10 years who are in the learning as well as struggling phase, because it is when learning is over the earning begins. That's what we understand in law. So I thought that since almost 3/4 of the young lawyers, whether they are in firm or they are working for some senior counsel or whether they are working of their own, they are primarily working on the civil side, because civil has a very, very vast area. So I thought of picking up a subject which probably could help the youngsters to not only learn but perfect the art of drafting, advocacy, arguing the case successfully in the court. And immediately to my mind came the subject relating to injunction. It has been my experience that whole lot of litigants who are normally in the courts, they are always looking in the event of a dispute for some injunction or some interim prayer from the courts, for which they need to go to the courts. The lawyers who are experienced or expensive probably could be out of their reach. So they naturally had to then probably look out for a lawyer ranging from 5 to 10 years of experience because of their own financial constraints. So it is in that area of injunction that many of the young lawyers find themselves engaged in the beginning and middle of their professional career. Now, injunctive law is also in the realm of civil law, and many of the lawyers do get opportunities for their clients for getting them some kind of a protection in the court. This could be ranging from cases like they want a stay of disposition, demolition, or someone is trying to commit the breach of an agreement. So these are broadly the categories which necessitates the approaching of the court by the litigants who would be pitching their hope on a relatively younger lawyer. And in that area, that aspect, the role of the young lawyers from 0 to 10 years come to prominence. And I must confess that in the beginning of my career and even in the midstream, I found number of occasions when a young lawyer who may be having 5 to 10 years of experience, if a client comes to him for seeking some injunctive relief, the lawyer would probably ask his other colleagues so as to have some copy of some plaint of injunction matter, maybe similar kind or some other kind. The whole idea for such a budding lawyer is to probably see the format of the plaint, understand the nuances which are to be incorporated in the petition to be filed by him, and to some extent borrowing of a petition from others does help for the time being. But in the ultimate run, it does not help him. So therefore, it becomes necessary for a lawyer before he drafts a suit for injunction or defends a suit in injunctive case, he must be aware or he must make himself understand the foundational nuances. Now, no doubt the students who pass out from the law faculties or law colleges spend a couple of 3-4 years struggling in the beginning of the career. They do make an attempt, but it has been the experience over the years that the academic training which is imparted in the law colleges does not really help them in the professional career, because what they study, the laws which may be required to be used, is only for the purpose of just getting through a degree. When you come to the mother earth, that the court, where you practice, you need to have a deeper understanding both of substantive law as well as the procedural law. I do understand that in the Faculty of Laws, the students are taught different subjects by different teachers at different point of time. So they have basically a compartmentalized approach toward the legal issues. But when you have to draft a case or a plate of injunction, mind you, it is not only the Specific Relief Act which gives the power of court to grant injunction, but at the same time, while drafting, host of other statutes like Evidence Act regarding admissibility of document, Registration Act, Stamp Duty Act, etc., all do come into picture. So therefore, once you have to draft a petition, you cannot be oblivious of the consequences of other statutes which can impact the filing of a case and successfully defending or prosecuting the same. Coming back to a situation, a client comes to the lawyer, he does not know about the legal nuances, he knows only the factual matrix of his case, and he will give you some bunch of papers, says, Vakil Sahab, ye pakadiye, here are the paper, ye mera case hai, I want an injunction, I have been dispossessed, my building is being demolished, or someone is entering into my property, so please help me out. The client role stops there, then comes the role of a lawyer. At that time, the lawyer must be aware of the foundational aspects of the very suit for injunction, either for filing it or for defending it. Now, when you are required to file an injunctive suit, you have to be very, very careful in the factual matrix. Let us understand what is injunction. Injunction is basically a judicial process where a court warrants that the other side should either do certain things or should forbear from doing such a thing. A client may be saying that I want that I am in the possession of this property for good 25 years. I have no rent receipt. the landlord is using, or the owner is using a muscle power, sending his goons to check me out. I have a family, sir, please protect me. Immediately it will strike you down. The idea will strike in your mind, how do I help such a litigant? Now, it is in that context one therefore must understand the concept of injunction as a thought process. When you say that grant me injunction, your client may be suffering, your client may be apprehending a danger, but that alone would not suffice. As a tactful lawyer, you will have to examine his factual foundation which the client gives in the light and as per the parameters of the statutes. Now, many of the lawyers who draft injunction suits, it has been my experience, when they were put, on what law do you ask for injunction? Immediately comes answer, sir, order 39, rule 1 and 2. Forgetting little that order 39, 1, 2 is only a procedural realm, that too when a suit is there. So there has to be a foundational basis for such a suit. Now, how do you get such a foundational basis? One has to look for the provision under the Specific Relief Act. Now, Specific Relief Act section 38 deals with what you know as a perpetual injunction, which otherwise means preventive. 39 section of the Relief Act talks about the mandatory injunction. Now, if I ask for injunction, I must show that what is my right. No doubt it is true that whenever there is a injury, then you have a right. That is the famous Roman maxim, ubi jus ibi remedium. Remedy is there because you are apprehending a grievance, an injury to your property, to your reputation, to any kind of situation. So therefore, then one must carefully look section 38(1), which is just in 5 lines, but it is a Bible. 38 section in plain simple language says that the court may grant you an injunction. Mind you, may. It's equitable and a discretionary relief. Court may grant you injunctive relief provided you are to establish that there is an obligation or a duty which the defendant owes to you to do something or not to do something. So there should be shown as the existence of an obligation. Then how the obligation is created? It is not in the air. The obligation qua the plaintiff by the defendant will have to be based either on contract, an agreement, or if there is no contract or agreement, then such an obligation must emanate from law. Now, law, when we say law, does not really mean only a statutory law. Law would mean a statute. Law would mean even your common law. Law could mean even in the realm of tortious law. Law could mean even on the customary law. Let us take an example of a customary. There is a house, residential house. They are 3 brothers. Their father died, and it happened to be an HO property. Now, one of the brothers, acting like a tough man, says to hell with everyone, I am going to sell this property. I don't care to hoots. Go, what do you want to do? So one of the participants who is a co-owner will come to you, Vakil Sahab, please save me, I am staying here. This is HO property. So there the defendant will owing you obligation because of a customary law that in a HO property everyone is a co-owner till there is a partition by metes and bounds. So there the obligation is owed by the threatening defendant not to sell the property unless it is partitioned. Now there could be cases where the obligation is created by a statutory law. Let me give an example. Partnership Act. There are 3 partners They're working with the name of A and B and Sons. They are selling good products. They have a goodwill in the market. There's a dispute. They all fall out. Now they then dissolve the firm. One of the tough man says, I will continue to use this A, B and Sons. I don't care. The man comes, sir, how can he do it? We were all three partners. It is dissolved. He has no right. So obviously, lawyer, you will have to research. Let me search law. Which law says that the defendant cannot use it? Then you look to the Partnership Act, which provides for a situation where the partnership dissolved, then none of the partners of the erstwhile firm will have a right to use either the goodwill or the firm. So that gives you the foundational basis. Yes, I have a right, and correspondingly defendant the obligation not to sell without a protection. So this existing of an obligation is must by the lawyer to establish. Merely that you are being threatened, that supposingly you happen to be a person who just saw a vacant piece of plot some fine day and just got into it, put some little hut and started living there, and after 3 months when the real owner comes, he wants to evict you. You go to lawyer, sir, save me, मैं 3 महीने से रह रहा हूँ. The first thing you will asking, hey, on what right? What basis? Are you in a settled possession from a long time? Are you a licensee? You are not a licensee, you are a trespasser. So therefore, then common law, the defendant does not owe you any obligation not to dispossess you. So these are the basically tools which a lawyer will have to work hard, that before he drafts the plaint for injunction, he will have to see that what is the right of my client. What is the right? Because the moment I have a right, then there is a corresponding duty with the other side. Then if you are able to show from the facts that there is a duty owed by the defendant not to do something or to do something, which duty is sought to be violated. That is the apprehension. Right in your favor, duty by the other side to you, that duty is sought to be violated, and as a result of such a violation, you are likely to suffer irreparable injury. This is the crux of section 38(1), and this is the, in fact, the Bible. The 4 sentences of 38(1) spell out, in essence, and guide and should guide any lawyer before he drafts a petition. Now, therefore, my suggestion and advice to my young friends will be, do not really get impressed merely by the fact that your client is going to get injured or he is likely to suffer. Please look at the relevant statutory provision. Look at what is the right which you can establish, either by some document, by evidence, or by some statute. Now, once you have done it, you got to do. Many of the time the client does not know the importance and relevance of a document. I remember when I started my career, I would tell the client, "Bhai, jo aapke thele mein hai, sab le aao." Those clients used to be from Chandni Chowk, Sadar Bazaar, Old Delhi, not educated class. So I said, you leave it up to me to decide what is relevant, what is not relevant. So therefore, a duty of a lawyer really becomes very, very onerous, that it is for him at that side to decide what kind of a document he should look into. So one thing is clear, so that once you want to draft a petition, your chronological facts, it's like this, the facts tell the truth. Your understanding the fact should be perfect, and it should be orderly done in a chronological, sequential manner. The moment you do it, the facts will narrate what would be the just conclusion. Now let me compare with the situation in old panchayat. There those people were not legally trained, you did not have any law or a procedure, but yet the panchayat and the panchayats used to do justice. How? They would hear the facts in a chronological manner and decide. See, let us understand, all our statute, all our acts are nothing but it is a codification of what should be in a given situation. As long as the law is clear, please use your faculties, please look for the statutes, and remember one thing, the client will give you facts, the client will give you documents. Now, at that time, you just cannot hurriedly on the facts and the document you file. There could be obstacle. Whether the document which you are filing, please see whether the law requires such a document to be compulsory registered, or does it require to be stamped? Because normally we have seen daily person says, sir, I bought the property, वो 2 रुपए का agreement to sell and on a paper affidavit he will get and power of attorney notarized. So at that time you have to use this your faculty. Sorry, this I cannot use it. Maybe other device. I tell you, I must confess, in the beginning of my career, faced with this situation, I knew that I am going to rely on an agreement of lease, unregistered 11 months. And I knew that immediately there will be difficulty regarding it being exhibited, because the document is not cannot be read in an evidence. It is unstamped or unregistered. So what I used to do, pick out those relevant covenants from the document, make it a point that you put them in a plate, and invariably in 75%, more than 75%, when the written statement would come, the answer would be it is a matter of record. So if that is said matter of record, so therefore those contents which are lifted verbatim from the agreement to sell or a lease deed which is not cannot be admissible in evidence, you are saved. Although some lawyers, experienced lawyer, would say to such a situation, the contents are denied for want of knowledge, because in that case the burden of proof will be on the plaintiff, which he can discharge only by a document which is not admissible in evidence. So therefore it's one of the hints that some cases or a majority of cases you get through by such situation. But invariably there is no denial of it, because the lawyer also knows, he will put the client, हाँ जी agreement हुआ था, ये हुआ था, हाँ जी हुआ था, they are not denied. So this is one of the important tips which one must keep in mind while drafting it. Now, injunction, let us understand. When you go and file injunction, in fact, today what we understand, we have a special relief act made in 1963. It's a remedy essentially which originated in the English Court of Equity, and it was equitable remedy and traditionally open when wrong could not be effectively remedied by way of damages. Now this concept of equity was incorporated in statute in 1963, and this injunction, one must understand, allows the person to maintain the status as it is on that basis when the litigation starts. So having said so, that put in a chronological manner, make sure that all the parties who are likely to be affected by such a injunction are made a party, and also make sure that once that is done, please look to the relevant law. Now, injunctive, I will just after a few minutes give you the most probable possible cases for injunction which comes in a day-to-day professional life of a lawyer. So, once you have drafted, please read the document very, very carefully, and plaintiff must aver and show existence of on what basis do you claim that the defendant owes the duty. So, having said so, now let me take you that the kind of situations as a young lawyer one comes to in so injunction suits are concerned. Now the most prominent and the most commonly known is suit against forcible disposition. Now our subordinate courts are flooded with such litigation. Any person coming, sir, this is my ration card, sir, this is my Aadhaar card, sir, I am staying here, sir, please protect me. Now, certainly law is that a person who may not have any title to the land, but if it is found to be in a settled possession, he cannot be thrown by forcible measures. In such cases, the defendant will owe an obligation to the plaintiff not to chuck him out without due process of law. Now, due process law could be A, if he is a tenant governed by the Delhi Rent Control Act, then obviously that provision will apply. If he is a person who is not a tenant, or is a person who is not protected by tenancy law because of rent being more than 3,500, nevertheless still he is entitled to protect his possession. And therefore, if the possession is not illegal, mind you, if possession is not illegal, then there will be a certainty of succeeding in a suit for injunction against forcible dispossession. Let us take example. There are government lands. There are people who are with the government land for 15 years, 20 years. Someday some SDA comes and says, I want to chuck you out. In that case, you can again say, sir, there is an act called Public Premises Eviction of Unauthorized Occupant Act, which mandates that a person who is unauthorized occupation shall be dispossessed by a state officer by filing eviction. You can go to the court. Sir, protect me. The court will certainly, in a suit for injunction filed, will say no disposition without due process of law. Now, second category is again very interesting category. Let a situation, seller enters into agreement with the buyer. Amount is certain. 50% amount has already been paid at the time of execution. Remaining is to be paid within 1 year. Now, suddenly the prices shoot up. The time for execution of sale deed is yet to come. The defendant is suspected to be interacting with others to sell the property and defeat the rights under the agreement to sell. In such case, you can file a suit for injunction without even filing specific performance, because mind you, you still have a right to wait for a period of 1 year to perform your part of the obligation. But since in the interregnum, it is the defendant which wishes to disturb the status quo and threatening to sell, a suit for perpetual injunction would be maintainable. In fact, this is a very interesting category, and this is commonly known as anticipatory injunction. In other words, in Greek, there is a call that these are a qui timit action. That is an action which is taken by the court not on the occurrence of injury, but even on a suspicion. Now, the plaintiff has a suspicion here as a buyer that I have already paid 50% of the amount. My right to pay the right to have sale deed has still 1 year left, so he cannot defeat my rights. So in such cases, the court will grant him interim injunction without forcing him to file a suit for specific performance. Many of the courts, even one of the colleagues, have this description, no, you such a perpetual injunction would not be maintainable, go and file a suit of specific performance. Now please understand, in a suit for specific performance, you will have to cough out huge amount of money as a court fee. Person says, what is my fault? I have paid whatever amount as advance, rest I had to pay within 1 year. So this is the category, so where there is no actual injury suffered, yet the person can be given a anticipatory injunction. Another category of, interesting category of the anticipatory injunction is in the realm of, let's say, IPR. There is a person who, company selling its product, having its trademark registered or not having registered, but is found to be using it for very long time. He has a suspicion that X, the defendant, is about to circulate in the market using his trade name. He can still go to the court for a suit for injunction. saying that though I have not suffered any injury, though the person is yet to start the manufacturing and using my brand name, but I have a suspicion. So this will be again a case of anticipatory injunction, and you will note down a judgment of our Delhi High Court in this. It is 2003, volume 26, PTC, page 60. Now this is the case, an example of anticipatory injunction. Now let me go to the fourth category. Time and again litigants do come, sir, I have a structure, MCD is coming to demolish it, or DD is going to demolish it, NDMC is going to demolish it, so please stop me, stop them. The first thing as a lawyer you'll ask, have you got a sanction plan? He said, I have got everything and I have not received any notice, show cause. So as to answer it, in such cases, you will be right in advising him to file a suit for permanent injunction, restraining the NDMC, DDA, MCD as the case may be, to demolish it, because here the obligation of the public authorities not to demolish is founded on a statute called MCD Act, NDMC Act, which says that before any coercive action can be taken, a notice to show cause is required to be given. Since without notice to show cause it is being sought to be done, court will interfere. So again the idea is to say, please look out for that jurisprudential legal right which you have, justifying the prayer for injunction. Let us take of another cases of negative covenant. Now there is a reported very famous case on this. You may note down the citation. That is called Gujarat Bottling Plant versus Coca-Cola. It is AIR 1975, Supreme Court, page 2372. This was a case where Coca-Cola company entered into a contract with Gujarat, permitting that they can manufacture the Coca-Cola with the ingredients supplied by them, with the formula given by them in their plant, and sell them under the franchisee of Coca-Cola. There was a negative covenant in that agreement saying that during the tenure of this agreement, the defendant Gujarat so and so would not part with this information or would not allow any third party right be created. What interestingly and mischievously Gujarat Bottling did, they allowed the 100% share transfer of their company to Pepsi, which was a rival. So therefore Coca-Cola went to the court and got an injunction which was upheld by the Supreme Court, that because there is a mischief done by the defendant, so there is a negative covenant that thou shalt not do it. Now they have done it in a surreptitious manner by, instead of allowing any third party, they have sold the share 100%. They lifted the corporate veil. They said now it has come to competitor. So injunction was granted that the competitor cannot use that plant using their technology. Now another case we have, which is again commonly filed, is against under the IPR. Trademark cases, they are filed in subordinate courts, high court, all over, and depending on the nature of stakes and the threat perceived by the agreed party, they choose a lawyer. Now there also again, for instance, A has a registered trademark in his favor, Sudarshan Dhoop. Some person mischievously uses some mark deceptively similar to one the plaintiff has registered. That is situation one. Other situation could be the mark may not be registered but has been used for a long time by the plaintiff, and that said mark is thought to be violated. Now again, it is a fit case where the defendant would owes an obligation emanating from the provisions of the Trademark Act, which prohibits the use of similar or a deceptively similar mark by the adversary. So again, what I am trying to show that this would be the case where the obligation is in favor of the plaintiff based on a statute, based on a law. There could be another category, cases where a person may assign his trademark for a period of 5 years, whereafter it has to be extended only after the mutual consent. 5 years are over, the person who was earlier using by virtue of the license continues. The registered holder of the mark then will be entitled to go to the court and say, sir, there is a covenant which permitted him only for a period of 5 years. So that 5 period is over, so he has no right. And the court would therefore will say, in absence of your having any right further, you owe a duty not to violate the trademark of another person. Now, in this regard, you can note down a judgment of Delhi High Court Division Bench called Pine Laboratories Private Limited versus Gemalto Terminal. I don't have the citation, but I have the FAO number. It was FAOOS 35 and 36 of year 2009. Now these are the categories which deal with either the injunction based on your right under the statute, under the contract or a common law. Then another category, when injuries to your reputation, your credibility. You come and file an injunctive suit. Now recently you must have read in the newspaper, our senior colleague Dr. Singhvi had to file a suit for injunction before the district court restraining a British advocate, Zaiwala, from publishing a book making allegations against him. An injunction was granted. Now this again, injunction is based on the right that I have a right to defend my reputation. Correspondingly, there is a duty on the part of the other not to spoil my reputation. So what I am trying to suggest, these all examples will show that your injunctive right has to emanate, has to be founded on an obligation. It is not that you are suffering injury, therefore you will be right. Like for instance, ex parte degree is passed against someone, the bailiff come to dispossess, sir please file injunction, I am being dispossessed. You say, sorry, what right have you got? He has a decree, he can execute, so he is not violating any obligation. So therefore what I am trying to say, the moment a lawyer learns the art of trying to cull out the obligation in favor of his clients by contract, by common law, by agreement, by statutory law, he would succeed. Now let us take another example, which is again commonly there. Day in and out you have the demands excessive by the house tax, electricity department, water department. They are making a bill, not making the reading, but say we are raising the amount on average basis. You will say under the tariff regulation, the bill can be raised only the basis of the meter reading. Having not taken the meter reading, you cannot make an arbitrary bill. So therefore again, a right has got vested in a agreed person and a duty is owed by the such a department. Let me give an example. Under the Income Tax Act, there is a provision which says about that if that demands are due, the tax recovery officer can sell the property of a defaulter. The situation had arisen that in the Income Tax Act, whatever is exempt under CPC will also be exempt under the Income Tax Act. Now CPC, curiously, section 60C, which was amended later on and became triple C, provided that the house belonging to judgment debtor other than agriculture, labor, etc., all be exempt. So I remember way back, it was just 1.5 years in my career, it was 82 probably. I had a case where the client came, sir, I have a house, 5,000 square meter plot in Kastura Gandhi Marg. my daughter's marriage is to be celebrated after 10 days, we have a demand and a proclamation, Kurki notice from the income tax. Now, if the notice comes to the newspaper, the boy's side will disown and they break the marriage. Then who are we marrying to? So I remember overnight I drafted the petition, showed that, sir, though it was not an injunction, it was a writ petition, but the basis again had to show right that Mr. Income Tax, you cannot attach, therefore you cannot sell something which is exempt from attachment. So therefore duty was owed by the income tax authority not to do it. Now another instance would be you have a lot of cases where there's a father-son dispute. Son is disowned by the father and he asked to leave, he leaves. Suddenly son gets married and the new daughter-in-law puts pressure, no, let's get back to the father-in-law's house. So father will say, listen, you have no right to butt in. It is my property, my self-owned property. You were earlier staying as a licensee, you left. I have a right to prevent you from having access to my house. So therefore, the law, in such a situation, lawyer will draft the plate very intelligently and say that the son having left had no interest in the property. Now therefore, father has a right to protect his property and has a right in common law to prevent any unauthorized person to enter. Son having been not authorized, so he should not enter, so injunction will be granted. Now this is one of the, now you have another set of cases where injunctions are granted which are on the basis of what you in America would call as a class action. Now suits are filed that a particular movie, a particular article, etc. is likely to defame a particular community. I was just reading in the WhatsApp other day that some notice has been issued to Netflix on the basis of the injunctive suit filed by a lawyer saying that one particular serial, I don't remember which name is it, is making fun of the lawyers. So this is a kind of a class action. So instead of an individual, in a class action, you may not have personal interest. It can be like a representative suit. But unlike a class action, when you file an injunction as an individual or as a corporate body, you must show that you have a personal interest in the matter. Another category is, which is most commonly used, is the bank guarantee, which is a creamy kind of cases which come day in out. Now, clients will come to you, sir, I have given a bank guarantee, I had a agreement with the builder, I had to make the construction, he did not make it, there's a dispute between me and builder, but he is invoking me the encashing the bank guarantee, sir. If bank guarantee goes, sir, I'll be doomed, sir, save me. Looks very attractive, interesting. But then you will ask him, sir, please let me have a look at the bank guarantee. Now, in a case of bank guarantee, again, bank can be restrained from remitting the amount, the defendant can be restrained from encashing only once you show that you have a right and they have a duty not to encash. There, in that case, all that you can do is look at the terms of the bank guarantee, and only defense you have got A, that the invocation of the bank guarantee is not in accordance with the terms of the bank guarantee. Please mind you, bank guarantee is a contract which is independent of the transaction between the beneficiary and the person who has given the, on whose behalf the bank guarantee is given. So bank is not concerned. Bank will say, this I have given undertaken on your behalf, I'll pay. So if you can show it to the court, sir, the duty is owed by the bank not to honor because the document says that the bank guarantee could have been encashed only on these conditions which are not there. So again, existence of an obligation. That the agreement gave you right to encash only these circumstances ABC which are not there. So injunction will be granted. And another case would be where it's a case of egregious fraud. And third would be a special equity. There are cases where the person who is the beneficiary settled abroad, the person who has been in the bank guarantee in India, in such cases, court do show some indulgence because they believe that equities appear in favor of the plaintiff, because once the money is gone, it will never be able to recover. So on bank guarantee, in fact, you can note down a judgment, which is landmark judgment, which has come 2019 SEC online, Supreme Court, page 1638, and please read relevant paragraph 19, 21 and 23. Now, the three paragraphs will make the law crystal clear to understanding. Now, another category is demonstration. You are a factory owner, you are running a factory, suddenly there's a dispute between you and the employees union. They start come and threatening the other employee, you will not interfere, we'll block your way, we'll not let you in, and they start rise cost slogan. Immediately he will contact a lawyer, sir, I have 500 workers, 100 or 150 workers are creating hell for the remaining 350 workers, they are troubling, sir, same me. You will simply say that you have a right to continue your trade and business without any interference from anyone, and this interference they owe a duty not to do it, the association. So you will say, but then court then again, being an equity, will not lose the sight that everyone has right to protest. So in such cases, the courts do constitute a balancing. All right, you will not demonstrate beyond, not within 100 square yards or 100 meters or 200 meters. Now, very interesting is against an anti-suit injunction, another category of suit, anti-injunction. That is a suit which are filed by someone in India by preventing some for a person outside the country. It was a case where husband and wife both were domiciled in US. Wife had filed, was about to file some case. The husband, through his power of attorney, filed a petition in Gurgaon and sought restraint against the wife in USA. The court would have granted, but for the fact they said, since you are yourself settled in USA, so you cannot do it directly here. But where if it's a resident of India, can definitely file. These are category of anti-injunction suit. You can note down the citation, 2018, volume 17, Supreme Court cases, page 12. Now, having said so, the category of injunction, now I am told that only 5-10 minutes are left, so let me conclude it quickly. Now, a client is not happy with the final merits of the case. He doesn't want a situation, sir, operation success, patient dead, sir, get me interim relief. So when you draft 3912 application, along with that, please make it sure that you make out a case where you must show that something needs to be tried, something needs to be investigated, and the balance of convenience is my favor, and comparative hardship in case if I am now case of demolition, disposition, destruction. The court will weigh in the favor of plaintiff because they cannot restore. So mind that you have to really frame your petition. Now, second category which comes is which is that court fee. Now, we have a jurisdiction value of the court fee. Now, what really happens? The person doesn't want to spend much on the court fee, so the idea is to go to the forum which are the least court fee. Now, person, now remember in our beginning, we used to give 130 रुपए का सूट, 13 रुपए की injunction court fee. So therefore, under the Suit Valuation Act, section 1714, you are entitled to fix any court fee to the relief you want to claim. You may claim, but once you claim that because remember in the court, in plaint, you must always mention value of pecuniary jurisdiction is X. Value for the purpose of court fee is now determinable either your Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. Is it a fixed court fee or is it ad valorem? Now in injunction suit, it is not a fixed, it is ad valorem. So once, therefore, you must value the court fee of your relief in such a manner so that it is at par with the injunction. There was a case where in a demonstration case, they say value of court fee, value of jurisdiction for the purpose of filing the suit against demonstration is 15 lakhs, 50 lakhs, and court fee he paid was rupees, and value for it he paid 200. Court says, sorry, you can't. Either you make a value of pecuniary value at par with so and so. You can't choose the two. So therefore, again, court fee is a factor where one has to be careful about it because that pinches the client's pocket. And last but not least, another aspect which you may consider, invariably what happens that the suit for injunction is linked with the declaratory relief. Now mind you, declaration is under section 34 of the Special Relief Act. You are entitled to for declaration. But even if you do not claim a declaration, like in cases, the very fact the court has to grant you injunction, it will have to go into the question whether do you have any right or not. But yes, there are cases like if someone has made a sale deed forging your signature and he is selling the property to third party. Now in such a cases you will have to claim necessarily declaratory relief because your injunctive relief would not be maintainable unless and until that sale deed which is forged is set aside. So therefore this will be cases your declaration will be a sine qua non before you get an injunctive relief. And another case is what really happens, you have MCD Act, you have Daily Development Act which says no suit to for file unless notice is given for 60 days. Now there was a case where the person had received a demand of 1 crore rupees from the MCD. So he filed a suit for injunction, a suit for declaration and for permanent injunction. The suit was dismissed initially by the subordinate court by saying the suit is barred because under section 478 of MCD Act you can only file suit for declaration, suit for injunction. But have you claimed, since you have claimed in declaration, therefore suit is not maintainable. Justice H.L. Anand, way back in 1974, Rajdhani Law Report, page 664 and page 198 held that merely the claim of declaration sometimes would be inconsequential because in essence the relief is for preventing the enforcement of an illegal demand. So court said the declaration is formal in nature, is not even required to be given. So therefore the suit was allowed. Now lastly, that coming from the defense side, there is a tendency, the moment ex parte stay is granted, the other side engages the lawyer instead of drafting the written statement, he tends to file a 39-4 application. Mind you, 39-4 has a very restricted approach. It's only where the plaint reading itself shows there is a fraudulent or or a concealment or something. There cannot be dispute to be adjudicated under 39-4 in a where there are trialable issues. So therefore it is always better, do not rush to 39-4 unless you find the plaint itself is a total nonsense, which invariably it is not. So therefore here is to move 39 to file 39-1 to reply, file pleadings and get it over as fast as possible. Now there are a lot to say, but I am giving to understand that my time is over. But then lastly I may say that one last minute, that injunction violation. Now there is a tendency in many of the courts, injunction granted once, to ensure the ex parte injunction granted, it is not vacated. They happen to file order 617 application, they file contempt 39-2A. So in those cases the law is very clear that the injunction, whether was granted rightly or wrongly, has to be tested on the touchstones of the pleadings as they were. The subsequent things would not. So therefore the court was called upon to first decide 39-1-2 and rather than getting the 39-2A. So that I am cutting it short because there is much long to say, but maybe in some other session. Thank you everyone for the kind listening.
We'll now open the floor for questions.
Okay.
People have they have sent their messages, their questions on the message. So, and I have already forwarded it to you. So if you can take up one question at a time and at least answer a few questions before ending the session.
Okay. I am asking a note. No. Let me know. There is a question from anticipatory injunction judgment, which one Pankaj wants that case law on injunctive relief, the anticipatory injunction. I had just cited it, if I'm not mistaken. Just would I written it down? Where did I write? Let me see the. I will just write. And Arashi, what's the next question, please? Oh yes, that was a bottling case. Just a moment. Let me. I'll answer to that. Let me see. What is the next question? Sorry, which one? Now, the question is that what are the chances of ex parte interim injunction? I remember that gave the Delhi High Court judgment, the PTC, that trademark, where the person who was running as a trade selling the goods as per the specific trademark, and there was someone in the offing who was about to start the threatened violation. The court said we do not have to wait till the other side starts manufacturing and bottling or selling the tainted products. So ex parte injunction is granted, but yes, injunction ex parte in anticipatory is a difficult task. It is not on the. It is basically provided when there is a suspicion, but the burden is very, very heavy on a person to prove that in case if this is not granted, what would be the irreversible injury caused to such a person. And I can now, the judgment can be noted down. Someone has asked about the anticipatory injunction. Please note down. What's the question? Judgment on anticipatory is Bristol Myers Squibb SQIBB Company and Bristol Myers India Private Limited. It is dated 11th of October 2017 by Justice Muralidhar. And another judgment is Mars Incorporated versus Kumar Krishna Mukherjee, 2003, Volume 26, PTC 60, Delhi High Court. These are two judgments of Delhi High Court. Now, Rajiv is asking tips to defend interim injunction order passed against the defendant. Now, Rajiv, let us be honest that as a professional, when we are a lawyer as a plaintiff, our aim and objective is to make sure that the interim order granted one shall continue as long as possible and file 617, file contempt. And on the other hand, the defender anxiety is that, listen, buddy, I am dead, I cannot continue, my products are stalled, I can't sell. So tip would be that do not wait for the 4 weeks period for filing the written statement. Please file written statement immediately along with an application for modification of the order and persuade the court, sir, rather than deciding the ex parte to be vacated or not, please decide 13 and 1 and 2. Because let me be very frank on this, arguments for vacation of the ex parte injunction orders would almost take the same kind of pleadings and at the same time, which time will be taken by the court to decide order 39, 1 and 2. So that is the important tip. So do not go to 39-4 route, file immediately the response, don't wait for 4 weeks, file within 4 days, file application for variation of the order, and at least you can court to persuade to hear the main 39-1 2. I hope, Rajiv, that makes good for you. Okay. Yes, Ruchi Agarwal has asked about the injunction in trademark is same as we file in other civil matter. Yes, as I said, injunctive relief is a civil remedy, though it is founded under the Trademark Act. So injunction can be taken for violation of your threatened trademark by pointing out to the court that there is a purported violation of my right of trademark which is registered. In that case, you will file suit for infringement. Or in case if your trademark is not registered, then you will say, since I have been using, I am prior user trademark, so defendant should be restrained from passing off his goods as mine goods. So yes, you are right. It is as in the civil matters. Now, thank you, Sumit, and thank you, everybody. Actually, civil law is such a vast thing that it does take time. So I was trying to be as brief as possible. So that whole idea was I could guide my young friends that do not look for a copy of plain from other colleagues. Goddamn, do it yourself. Pick up the facts. Put it in a nutshell. One successful handling of a case either side will make you perfect for the next cases to come. So thank you, everybody. It was a nice having this sort of interaction. Thank you and God bless. And I must thank Sumit. I must thank Robbie. I must thank Mr. Sham Sharma and also Talveen, who have been quite instrumental in preparing for this sort of a dialogue. Thank you very much and God bless and stay blessed.